There is something in your garage, your shed, your driveway, or on the underside of a vehicle you paid real money for, eating through the metal right now. Rust does not pause. It does not stabilize on its own. And if you have been to a hardware store looking for the answer, you have seen the wall of products, the sprays, the converters, the naval jelly, the rust encapsulating primers, and you have walked out $30 lighter with something that worked for one season and let the rust come right back through. What I'm about to show you is not a new product. It is not a better spray can. It is a chemical process documented in metallurgical literature since the early 1900s, used by the United States military to protect every piece of metal equipment, from firearms to vehicle frames to structural components, in conditions far worse than anything sitting in your backyard. And hardware stores have spent decades selling you a diluted version of the same chemistry for 10 times the price of the raw ingredient. The active compound cost $5. A single bottle treats more metal than most people own in a lifetime. And once you understand what that compound actually does at the molecular level, you will never look at a rust converter label the same way again. Stay with me, because the technique I am sharing at the end of this video is the specific sequence that professional metal restorers use on the part of the rust problem that almost no consumer guide has ever addressed correctly. Rust is not dirt. That distinction matters more than most people realize, because it changes everything about how you should treat it. Dirt sits on metal. Rust is metal, specifically iron that has chemically bonded with oxygen and water to form iron oxide, a compound that is structurally weaker than the original metal, porous at the microscopic level, and, critically, self-propagating. That last property is the one that explains why every approach you have probably already tried has eventually failed. Rust is porous. Oxygen and water molecules continue moving through the rust layer to reach the fresh metal underneath. Left untouched, rust does not slow down. It accelerates. The deeper it penetrates, the more surface area it exposes, and the faster the reaction proceeds. This is why the standard consumer approach, sand it, prime it, paint over it, works for a season and then fails. The sandpaper removes visible surface rust, but leaves microscopic particles and pits in the metal that the primer cannot fully seal. The rust that remained, invisible under the new finish, continues moving inward. You painted over a biological clock, and within a year or two, it pushes back through the surface and reappears, often in a worse location than where you started. The chemistry that actually solves this has been known for over a century. Most people have never heard it explained clearly because the hardware store aisle is not designed to explain chemistry. It is designed to sell product. And the product on the shelf benefits from the consumer not understanding why it works or what the active ingredient actually is. The chemistry that actually solves this has a name: phosphoric acid. When phosphoric acid contacts iron oxide, it does not dissolve the rust and leave bare exposed metal. It converts it. The reaction between phosphoric acid and iron oxide produces iron phosphate, a compound that is chemically stable, non-reactive with atmospheric oxygen, impermeable to water, and that bonds directly to the underlying metal surface. The rust does not disappear. It transforms into something that cannot continue corroding, that is darker and harder than the original rust, and that serves as a direct adhesion surface for paint and primer superior to bare metal. This is not a marketing claim. It is the documented chemistry published in metallurgical research and confirmed in industrial applications for over 100 years. Iron phosphate coatings are used in manufacturing as a standard metal preparation step before painting. Automotive assembly lines use them. Appliance manufacturers use them. The process of phosphate coating metal, called Parkerizing in its military form, was patented in 1906 by Thomas Watts Coslett, a British engineer who understood that converting rust was more effective than removing it. The United States military adopted his process within the decade and used it on firearms, vehicles, tools, and structural equipment through both world wars and every military operation since. The chemistry is over a century old. The results are in the records, and the active ingredient is available at your hardware store for $5. Now, I want to talk about why that $5 bottle is not the first thing hardware stores show you when you walk in looking for a rust solution. The automotive chemicals market in the United States generates over $15 billion in annual revenue. Rust treatment, rust prevention, and rust repair products are a significant and growing segment of that number. The companies that make branded rust converters, rust-inhibiting primers, rust-encapsulating paints, and anti-rust sprays have a straightforward financial interest in keeping the conversation focused on their products, rather than on the underlying chemistry those products contain. And the way that interest expresses itself is not through hiding information. It is through positioning, shelf space, and marketing budgets that dwarf anything an independent consumer researcher can produce. Here is what the label on a $25 rust converter almost never states directly. The active ingredient is phosphoric acid, typically at a concentration of 15 to 30%. The remainder of the formulation is water, a thickening agent, and sometimes a latex component that helps the converted surface accept paint more smoothly. The phosphoric acid does all the work. The formulation adds shelf appeal and application convenience. The price difference between the branded product and the raw ingredient is almost entirely margin. A quart of phosphoric acid sold as metal prep or metal etching solution, available at the same hardware stores that sell the branded converters, costs $5 to $8 and contains enough active ingredient to perform dozens of treatments. Naval jelly, sold in those same stores for $12 to $15 per small tube, is phosphoric acid suspended in a gel carrier designed to cling to vertical surfaces. The gel is genuinely useful for overhead or vertical applications. The tube is not. The price is not. But the naval jelly gets the end cap display. It gets the prominent shelf position. It gets the marketing literature. The $5 bottle of metal prep gets a spot in the back corner of the paint section with no explanation of what it does or why it works. There is, however, a specific piece of this story that goes beyond the pricing of phosphoric acid. There is a product that occupies prominent floor display space in nearly every hardware store in America, positioned directly adjacent to rust treatment products that most Americans reach for first when they see rust. And that is not only ineffective as a rust preventer, but is documented to accelerate corrosion on most metal surfaces over time. Before I get to the weekend fix, I need to tell you about one more thing. Because if you have been reaching for this product every time you see rust, you need to understand what it is actually doing to your metal. WD-40. The letters stand for water displacement, 40th formula. It was developed in 1953 by the Rocket Chemical Company for use on the Atlas missile airframe, specifically to displace moisture and prevent temporary oxidation during storage and transport. It is a water displacer and a penetrating lubricant, and it is genuinely exceptional at what it was engineered to do. What it was not engineered to do and cannot do is prevent rust on any long-term basis. WD-40 evaporates within days. It leaves a light, oily film that attracts airborne dust and particulate matter. Dust on metal traps atmospheric moisture. Trapped moisture accelerates oxidation. Using WD-40 on metal you intend to protect from rust is the equivalent of applying a slow rust accelerant and calling it maintenance. The manufacturer's own product documentation has consistently described WD-40 as a temporary protectant and has never claimed long-term rust prevention. And yet, it occupies more shelf space in the rust treatment section than any phosphate-based product in America. Because there is a $15 billion industry that depends on the rust problem remaining unsolved. Now, before we go further, I want to speak directly to the people watching this who are thinking, all of this is useful background, but I need to know what to do this weekend. I have rust right now on tools, on outdoor furniture, on a trailer hitch, on a structural rail I can see from where I am sitting, and I cannot take it apart, sandblast it, or send it somewhere. What do I actually do? Stay right here, because this specific part is for you. You do not need a sandblaster. You do not need to disassemble anything. You do not need specialized equipment. The phosphoric acid treatment works on rust exactly where it is, in place, without removing the corroded component from service. Here is the sequence, step by step, for this weekend. You go to any hardware store, the same stores that sell the $25 branded converters, and you look for phosphoric acid metal prep, phosphoric acid etching solution, or a product labeled rust converter that lists phosphoric acid as its active ingredient. A quart costs $5 to $8. That is what you buy. For small items, tools, hinges, bolts, chain links, brackets, blade hardware, you mix 1 part acid to 3 or 4 parts water in a plastic container. You submerge the rusted items for 1 to 2 hours. You will see the rust visibly convert during this time, shifting from orange to a dark gray or matte black. Remove the items, shake off the excess solution, and allow them to dry completely in open air. Do not rinse. That instruction matters, and I will come back to it. For larger surfaces, vehicle panels, outdoor railings, gate frames, structural metal that cannot be submerged, you apply the undiluted or lightly diluted solution with a brush, a sponge, or a cheap pump sprayer. You work it into the rust thoroughly. Allow it to sit for 15 to 30 minutes, and then you allow it to dry completely. You do not rinse. You do not wipe it down. You leave it. The instruction not to rinse is the step that almost every consumer guide gets wrong, and that explains why so many people try a phosphoric acid product, follow the rinsing instructions on the bottle, and then conclude that it did not work as well as they expected. Rinsing after phosphoric acid treatment removes the iron phosphate conversion layer you just created. The water strips the chemistry off the surface and re-exposes the metal to air. The iron phosphate coating that you created is the protection. It needs to remain on the surface. You dry it. You paint over it. That is the complete application sequence. And the reason it produces results that last is because you are not covering rust. You are ending it. Now I want to give you the historical depth behind why the United States military trusted this chemistry with the equipment that soldiers' lives depended on. The Parkerizing process, named after the Parker Rust-Proof Company, which licensed and commercialized Thomas Coslett's original phosphate coating patent, was adopted by American military procurement in the 1920s and had become standard for firearms production by the mid-1930s. The matte gray or dark olive finish you see on military rifles, pistols, and machine guns from World War II is not paint. It is iron phosphate, rust converted to a stable protective coating through a controlled chemical process. More than 4 million M1 Garand rifles were produced during World War II. Every single one was Parkerized. Every M1 911 pistol issued to American officers, every Browning automatic rifle carried by infantry units. The scale of that application, millions of pieces of precision equipment treated with a phosphoric acid process expected to function in jungles, deserts, Arctic conditions, and saltwater environments without failing, represents one of the largest documented real-world validations of any surface treatment technology in history. The phosphate coating was chosen specifically because it does not peel, does not chip in the way paint does, withstands temperature extremes, reduces visible reflection in combat conditions, and can be reapplied in the field without specialized equipment. The United States Army Ordnance Department documented the process in technical manuals archived by the National Archives. The concentrations, the dwell times, the inspection criteria, all of it is there, describing a chemical process that costs $5 to replicate on your workbench. It was applied across tens of millions of pieces of military equipment because the military needed something that worked absolutely, in every climate, with zero tolerance for equipment failure. The metallurgical science confirming why it works has been in the literature since before the First World War. What happened to that knowledge in the consumer marketplace is the same thing that happens to practical knowledge when a profitable industry grows up around the problem it solves. It did not disappear. It became specialized. The chemistry was licensed, branded, and reformulated into products sold at retail margins, and the underlying compound was quietly repositioned from a solution into a raw material consumers were not expected to work with directly. The Parkerizing process became something done in commercial finishing shops. The phosphoric acid metal prep became something stocked in the back corner of the paint aisle without explanation. And the branded rust converters, containing the same active chemistry at a fraction of the concentration and volume, at several times the price, became the recommended solution for a problem the underlying chemistry had already solved 100 years earlier. Now, I promised you the part that almost no consumer guide gets right, the part that makes the difference between treating the rust you can see and actually solving the rust problem that is destroying your metal. And it is this. Every guide, every product, every video on rust treatment addresses the visible surface. The rust you can reach with a brush or a spray. But in most metal structures, vehicles, trailers, railings, gates, outdoor furniture with hollow sections, the majority of the rusting is happening on the interior, inside a closed box section, inside a door panel, inside a hollow rail or a tube frame. The places you cannot see, the places no brush reaches. And this is where the rust actually perforates the metal. The outside shows surface rust. You treat it and paint it, and meanwhile the interior surface is converting to oxide from the inside out. Until the day a rail fails, a panel bubbles from the inside, or a hole appears in a location that makes no sense from the outside. The fix for interior cavities is the same chemistry and it costs the same $5, but the application is different. Locate the lowest accessible point on the enclosed section, a drain plug hole, a seam, or a small access hole you drill with a 1/4-inch bit. Mix your phosphoric acid solution slightly more diluted than the exterior application, 1 part acid to 5 parts water, and use a small funnel to introduce the solution into the cavity. Tilt and rotate the piece to allow the solution to contact all interior surfaces. Allow it to sit for 20 minutes, then drain it completely through the same access point. Do not rinse the interior. Allow it to dry with the access hole open and exposed to air for 24 hours. Once dry, introduce a penetrating lanolin-based cavity wax through the same access point. Fluid film is the commonly available brand. Lanolin, derived from wool, is one of the most effective and durable rust inhibitors documented in material science, used in marine and military applications for decades. It displaces moisture, does not dry out or crack, and provides a flexible protective film that moves with the metal through temperature cycles. One can of fluid film costs approximately $12 and treats the interior cavities of an entire vehicle. Applied annually, it holds. Exterior phosphoric acid conversion. Interior phosphoric acid conversion. Lanolin cavity wax. $5 for the acid that does the chemistry. $12 for the wax that seals the interior. 1 weekend. A rust problem that does not come back. The $15 billion automotive chemicals market depends on rust being a recurring problem, something you manage season after season rather than something you solve once and do not think about again. The $5 phosphoric acid treatment, applied correctly, with the interior cavity step that nobody in the retail rust treatment industry describes in their marketing, solves it once.
That is the arithmetic behind everything you have not been told.
Your grandfather did not throw away metal when it rusted. He understood that metal and chemistry have a relationship, and he used that relationship rather than buying a replacement. That knowledge existed in military technical manuals, in metallurgical textbooks, in the hands of the machinists and the mechanics and the farmers who kept equipment running through wars and depressions and every generation of planned obsolescence the manufacturing industry has produced. It did not disappear. It moved out of the mainstream conversation when a mainstream conversation around rust became profitable. It is back now. If you are the kind of person who believes that documented, century-old chemistry should not cost $25 in a small branded can when the active ingredient costs $5 per quart, you already know what comes next. We find these things. We put them here. The research behind what I have shown you today is in military technical manuals, in metallurgical journals, in a patent filed in 1906 that anyone can read at the United States Patent and Trademark Office. None of it is hidden. All of it was available long before any of those products appeared on the hardware store shelf. The question was never whether the knowledge existed. The question was who had the budget to make sure you heard it first. Tell me in the comments what rust has been costing you. Tools, vehicles, structure, whatever it is. Come back in 60 days and tell me what a $5 bottle and one Saturday afternoon did to that number. This channel exists for the people who are done paying more for problems that cost almost nothing to solve. The next video is